Hey guys, hope everything is okay. Today I have with me one of the legendary guitar players from the Indian scene. I'm just very excited and humbled to to have him in the guitar collective community. So he's from the Shillong region up in northeast, Mr. Rudy Wallang. So Rudy bhai, I think I'll just hand it
Hi,
over
Khurram.
to you for all the good stuff because I think there's too much of it, right? So over to you.
Yeah, talk for us. Thanks for having me on, Khurram. And when like I said, when I got that call from you earlier, I think a couple of weeks ago, I was really happy because for me, it kind of, I got the feeling of hope for guitar players this side of the world. So, we already have a guitar playing group in India headed by Esa Nurani. So when you gave me this, I said, not bad. I mean, why not? The more guitar players, the better.
The better.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, talking about my journey in music, I come from a place called Shillong, which is in the northeast of India, in a state, the capital of a state called Meghalaya, just bordering Bangladesh. We have Bangladesh on the south. Shillong being a valley and about 3,000 feet above sea level, the weather is very, very pleasant here, especially during the summers. So back in the day, in the 1940s and 50s, we had a lot of the British soldiers and American soldiers that stayed back after the war for a while and
Hmm.
made Shillong their home. And then we also had the tea planters from Assam, a neighboring sister state. They would use Shillong as their summer capital. Okay, so all these people would come up and they would bring their music with them. And that's how our people here in Shillong, the Khasi people, that's the tribe that we come from, they got exposed to Western music at a very early time. And my dad, he befriended a lot of these people. And my dad was a musician. So when I was like 4 or 5, years of age, I'd always have musicians in the house. All my dad's friends coming together and they'd be jamming, sitting in the living room, acoustic guitars, and they'd be playing songs, and I would be sitting in the corner and listening to them. And then one day, like my uncle, my grand uncle, he had gone to Hawaii and he had come back with a ukulele for
Oh,
me, and he presented me with the ukulele. So that was my kind of like uh, steps into playing a stringed instrument. Then my dad, he taught me how to play that. So we would do a lot of country and western songs of that era. So we had this record player at home, and all these records, the vinyls, Tom Jones, the Platters, Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, all the rock and roll stuff, all the soul stuff, Nat King Cole.
oh,
And my dad was into all this kind of music then, So I kind of imbibed all of that, growing up. I mean, I never knew that I would be a musician when I was a kid. Friends would come from outside and bring my dad albums. Then my dad used to sing in Calcutta in Trinkers on Park Street. 3 months of the year when my mom would have holidays from her teaching in school. So December, Jan, and Feb, we would shift to Calcutta. So my dad had a contract for 3 months there. They gave him a flat, and we would live there. And then we'd go. He'd take us along for the matinee show that was in the daytime, because kids were not allowed at night.
mm,
So we
yeah.
would go, and I would see them sound checking, and I would see them playing, and that was my first experience of live music. I think I was lucky in a way. I was blessed because my dad was a musician, so I would see these guys on stage with guitars. I remember I used to dance to the music, me and my younger brother, Brian. So little did I know that these influences and these experiences later on would shape my life the way it is today for me. But my dad didn't want me to become a musician. He said, you have to be an IAS officer or an IFS, Indian Foreign Service, or something like that. He said, because if you're a musician, you will never make a living. One day when you get married and have a family, he said, you're not going to have enough money to do that. At that point of time, I didn't understand that. He was very famous in this part of the world, in the eastern part of the world. He was known as the man with the golden voice. But he didn't earn enough money to keep his family, to sustain the family. So he told me, he said, you're not going to become a musician. But then for me, the calling was too much, was too great. Okay. And my mom supported me. So she bought me my first guitar.
Oh,
I don't know if you've heard of the Reynolds brand, Reynolds, which is famous in India, the acoustic Reynolds guitars.
hmm
So back in the late 70s, 80s, Reynolds was like, we never had Fenders and Gibsons and all the other guitars. They were not available in India. If we saw one Fender, it was like, wow. It was like magic. It was only later on in life that when I started off the studio and started recording and stuff like that, and when dad saw me doing pretty well, traveling, earning a living as a musician, that he kind of finally accepted. And sadly, this was just before he passed away, you know,
oh, okay.
yeah, about 15, 17 years ago. So one day, a friend of ours, a late friend of ours, he came over to my place and he said, we have another musical icon here in Shillong by the name of Lou Majau. He's known as the grandfather of rock and roll, maybe in India. I don't know. So what happened was that they had a band called the Great Society, and they were planning to have their first concert here in Shillong. So this guy, the guy who was helping them, a mutual friend, he came because he knew that I used to sing solo acoustic, So he came to me and he said, Rudy, like the band is planning to do this, so we would like you to come and sing in between when the band is taking a break. So I said, cool, let's do it.
Yeah,
Let's
why
do it.
not? Why not?
Yeah, yeah. He said, you come down to Victory Restaurant, and Lou will be there at 9 a.m. in the morning. You come and let's discuss this and let's get it going. So I said, okay. I was there at 9. And then Lou just happened to ask me, he said, do you play bass? So I said, no, I've never ever played bass guitar. He said, no, do you think you could play bass? Because we don't have a bass player and the gig is like a week away. So he said, okay, tomorrow you go with AJ and you go and learn some of these songs. And I'd never ever heard any of these songs in my life. So I said, let's go and do that. So I went with AJ and he started teaching me the songs. Within a week, I learned how to play bass and we went and did this gig live. So the Great Society was my stepping stone. I was with the Great Society for 12 years
Oh,
after
okay.
that. Yeah. So I played bass guitar with them for about 5 years. And then Arjun left. At that point of time, we played a lot of fates. Fates are like fairs in the different localities in Shillong,
Mm.
in the adjoining areas, in different districts. At that point of time, we didn't have PA systems, so we had to carry our own. We made our own speakers, own amplifiers. I don't know if you've heard of the Ahuja amps. We used to carry these amps. We made these speakers. We would buy speakers, fit them in, and we'd carry all these in one taxi in a cab. Go play these fates for about 6 hours. We finished the gig by 1 o'clock in the morning, 1 a.m. in the morning, load the cab with all our gear, drive back to Shillong.
Typical musician.
Typically, yeah, musicians nowadays have it so much easier because you go for a gig, your amps there, the amps, everything's available. That was a huge learning experience for me, man. Besides the music, just just being a musician, living that
Yeah,
life, you know, rock and roll,
I know
just being
because yeah, Rudy bhai, a lot of people just take, for example, guitar playing as just having a guitar and playing. There's so much more to it. I mean, what you're just saying is I mean, guitar playing is just a small part of it, right? I mean, if you guitar player, very nice. I mean, if you could play something, there is an
correct.
ocean out there, of the stuff that you just described. Packing
Yeah,
up,
yeah,
going there, setting it up, then going, changing, getting up on stage, playing. When the playing is finished, packing up again, and then coming
yep.
back home.
Rolling in.
You
Yes, yes.
and
Yeah, I
actually in
mean,
that whole journey, that whole day, you only played guitar for like what, 30 minutes, that main thing, or an hour. The rest 24 hours you were just juggling, from A to
yeah, exactly, exactly. So 12 years with the Great Society, and then after that, the band disbanded. Then I wanted to take a break because at that point of time, when I was with the Great Society, that's when I started getting into the blues because Arjun, my friend Arjun, and Lou, those days there was no internet, so we'd have cassettes that we'd get from friends. Maybe somebody's brought a cassette from somewhere. We just kind of record it, dub it, keep a copy for ourselves, and give it back to a friend. And that's how we shared music back in the day. You know, music was so precious. Like if I had one tape, it was so precious to me. I would never lose sight of that.
Yeah,
That was my
I know.
food. That was my soul food. You know,
Yeah.
Arjun was already into people like BB King, hardcore BB King fan, Freddie King, and we would play some of their songs. But then after I left the Great Society, that's when I decided to take a break from playing music for a while. I got married pretty early. I was like 25 when I
Okay.
got married, you know, and I just wanted to take a break from music and kind of find my bearings. I was a little older, find my bearings as a musician, just to find out, what path I wanted to take. Because all this time I was playing music that was written by somebody else, by Lou.
Mm.
Lou was the leader of the band, and
The
he's a
songwriter.
fantastic songwriter. Yeah, and of course Arjun Sen. Arjun Sen really got me into like so many things on the guitar, like the feel and being on the road without any distractions of like cell phones and stuff. All we knew was like music.
Music.
We'd sit
Yeah.
down and just play and just sit down and play and jam, and we'd teach each other things, like that. But for me, those are just memories now, you know, like we never recorded any of that stuff. I just remember like what AJ taught me, where we sat in that particular room, on that day. Yeah, so Great Society, I took a break. And then one day, my friends, Sam, the drummer from Great Society, and the bass player, they said, Rudy, there's a gig happening. There's another fete in a place called Joai. He said, they want a band to play. He said, let's go. He said, we need money also, man. so, I told my wife, I said, say, look, this was like about 6 months down the line. I didn't do anything. My mom's got a school. She's a teacher. So I was working there. What happened was, whatever pocket money that I would get or whatever money that I saved, I would go to town and buy cassettes. And that point of time, there were a lot of cassettes of Lightning Hopkins and Memphis Mini and Muddy Waters
Mm.
and all these people that suddenly flooded Shillong. And all these cassettes were from Thailand, from Bangkok and Nepal. So for me, like, I decided to unlearn everything I learned from the time I joined the Great Society. I just stopped playing electric guitar and I took up the acoustic
Okay.
and I retaught myself. And I was listening to all these acoustic blues. And I used to question myself. I loved Eric Clapton, you know, like for me, like from Eric Clapton and Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green.
Yeah. Peter Green. Yep.
And one day, kind of like, I was questioning myself. I said, like, I wonder who their influences were,
Mm.
you know? So I used to buy books, encyclopedias on rock and encyclopedias on country music and jazz and stuff like that. And then I followed their trail. And then I realized they all came back. They went down to Robert Johnson and Son House,
Yeah.
Buddy
All
Guy on the way.
because blues was black people's music. So I mean,
Correct.
if Clapton plays the blues or Peter Green plays the blues, I mean they picked it up from there. It's as simple as that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I didn't realize all that at the time. So this was all a learning experience for me. There was no internet, like I said. I relearned playing guitar and I got really deep into the blues. This was around 94. That was a very important period in my life where things changed for me. And then soon after that, okay, we went and played this gig, came back. We formed another band called Mojo, which sustained for 9 years.
Hmm.
So it was quite well known in the circuit in the Northeast. We played every state in the Northeast, every nook and cranny of Shillong and Joai. Like, we played on the roads, we played in garages, we played in fields, we played on people's porches, you know. We played everywhere. But for us, it was like, yeah, we got a gig. The most important thing, just to go and make music.
Yeah, an experience playing live.
And experience playing live. And there were so many things that we learned about our culture, like in the Northeast of India, you know, that I wouldn't have learned just being sitting at home in Shillong
Yeah.
if it wasn't for the music. It took me all around. We made so many friends, so many good people all over the place, you know. and different kinds of food. I love food, so always open to tasting something new. So that's how it happened. So after Mojo, 9 years, we came out with one album. It was called Blues for Brotherhood.
And you also
Yes,
sang
yeah,
on that.
because at that point of time I was still singing.
Okay.
And then so after Mojo, we disbanded. At that point of time, I mean, I just started off the studio, started off recording. It was like uh, an extra way of earning income,
Yeah.
when because those days we didn't have really many gigs, you know and the only gigs that we played would have been maybe in Delhi or Calcutta. Delhi at the college festival circuit.
Hmm.
So maybe 2 gigs a month, 1 gig a month, depending. If it was good, 3 gigs a month.
Hmm.
So I had to do something else to, because my family was growing as well, you know. So took a loan, started off the studio, and in the meantime, recording one day. I was getting more into the blues, and then one day I was approached to do an album, a gospel album.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And Tips, who's now with Soulmate, she was one of the singers in the album, and she was very young. I didn't know her at that point of time. So she happened to be one of the singers. And when I heard her, like, kind of just blew me away. I said, man, this is it, you know? So I said, my feeling for the blues, and she's got the blues. I think we can work something out together. And that's how Soulmate started. Tips and myself are the core of Soulmate. And we've had the honor of playing with so many great musicians. I can't believe it. I'm so blessed.
Oh, great, great, Rudy Bhai. And how many albums actually have you released with Soulmate?
Yeah, so far we've released 4 albums.
Oh, wow.
And there's not really a culture for Western music here. If you're
Yeah.
Bollywood or something, I guess that would be something else. But for Western music, and specifically the blues, which is a niche
This is a
genre,
very
like, I
niche.
mean,
And,
especially here.
but even Rudy Bhai, even for the that Bollywood scene, it's not an album, right? It's film by film. So
Songs,
it's, I mean,
correct.
you don't call that actually an album. It's
Yeah,
basically for that film, right?
yeah, songs,
So
yeah, film songs.
it's a film song, right? So it's not
Yeah,
like an
yeah,
album, like
correct.
let's say a band puts out, BB King puts out an album, or there's an album by, let's say, Jimmy Page or whatever, or John
Correct,
Mayer.
correct,
They're just
correct.
they're made for a specific purpose, or for a specific
Yeah,
scenario in that film, and there are like 6 or 7 of these scenarios. So I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I won't call that an album. I'll probably call that a film score. You know?
yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the way it is here. And Bollywood is big. It's
Yeah,
just that we, being a Western music band in India and playing the blues. When I met Tips, she was still young, but she had that voice, she has that power, and she has the soul, the feel for it.
that's the
And I
important thing.
started, yeah, and I started, kind of like educating her, introducing a lot of musicians to her, singers, especially singers, like especially the blues female singers, people like Coco Taylor, Etta James, uh, and then jazz, Ella Fitzgerald, and then Billie
Hmm.
Holiday. Yeah, 4 albums. We're working with local Khasi folk musicians right now.
Okay.
And yeah, so hopefully the end of this year. And then in between, like, I sit down, and both my sons, Leon, my eldest son, he plays bass,
Oh,
and Vincent, my youngest son, he plays drums.
okay. Awesome.
So yeah, so they're the rhythm section of the band, and they work really well together. And now we've been playing for quite some time, so that understanding is there. I'm happy that way, because like other musicians, I don't get to tell them what to do.
They're your kids, right? You can tell them,
My
don't.
kid, I say, okay, yeah, I can, yeah, but I don't boss over them. I just say, okay, like, the thing is, you got to listen to the song, internalize it, feel it. 18 years for a blues band in India so far, it's not a bad job.
Not a bad job at all,
Absolutely.
Rudy bhai. So then, in the coming, I would say, months. I know you mentioned about the album end of this year. So do you plan to release any singles with videos? Like, let's say in the coming weeks or months.
Oh
Any
man,
such plan?
that's one thing we haven't really got down to. Um, I released one single last year with. I don't know if you've heard of Blackstrat Blues. Warren
No.
Mendonca, guitar player from Bombay. Now he's based in New Zealand. Deny the Bogeyman,
Yeah.
about this virus and about all the boogeymen in high places, that control us,
Yeah.
politicians especially. Yeah,
Politicians, the corporates.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Right now, like Soulmate, we're bringing out a vinyl. It's still a surprise, so I won't talk so much about it right now. It's going to be a vinyl release, I think, in the month of July or August.
Okay.
So we're working on that at the moment. So that's in the works. And we were supposed to be making one video before the lockdown, and then suddenly this whole lockdown thing happened.
Which
Now that's
change everything.
yeah, that's kind
Yeah.
of like put on hold right now. With Soulmate, we've traveled the world.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, we've traveled the world. We've played. I mean, really blessed. We've played in the U.S. We've toured. We've played in the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. We did that in 2012.
Awesome.
2007, we played in Memphis for the International Blues Music Challenge.
Okay.
First Indian band ever to play there. Like we were semi-finalists and stuff like that. So we made some good friends then. So in 2010, we planned another trip back for the festival again. When you want something to happen and you really want it bad, and
It
you work
does.
towards it, it will happen. No doubt about that. And I've experienced that in my life so far through the band, through
I
music.
agree. You're absolutely right, Rudy Bhai.
We went to Memphis. Then from Memphis, a friend of ours from Shillong who lives in Alabama. So we went and stayed with them for a week. Then we took the Greyhound bus from Alabama. We traveled all the way up to Manhattan, to New York City. The
That's a
Greyhound
long
bus.
drive.
Long drive, man. So we traveled Manhattan, met another friend. We lived in New York for a couple of days. We played in Rhode Island at Brown University, and they flew us from there to Denver. Then we played up at Winter Park in Colorado. We stayed there. Came down to Manitou Springs and to Boulder, Colorado. We played a couple of gigs there. Flew back to Memphis. Came back to India.
Mhm.
So we stayed for a month and did a small circuit there. Then we traveled to Europe. We played in Norway. We've played in France. We've played in Germany at festivals there. Sweden. Then Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, even Russia. Like we played in 2015.
Oh,
We did a tour of Moscow and the southern states down in Russia. So yeah, man. I mean, like, and people have accepted us. We were a little nervous initially, like for a blues band from India, and the first time like traveling out, how
yeah.
would the audiences accept us? You know, whether they would reject or accept. But I think in the U.S. and everywhere, I mean, the home of the blues, we were really well accepted, and that gave us so much more confidence that we were on the right path and playing it in the home of the blues.
And
Yeah,
I personally feel that in our part of the world, right, they have a habit of comparisons. So they
yeah,
start comparing you, which
yeah.
I don't find in that culture. In that culture, it's all about the music, right? They listen to what you're playing.
Acceptance,
Yeah. And if
acceptance.
if they like what they hear, that's it. They'll say, "Man, that was good, man. You played. I loved
Yeah,
it." So, and I
exactly,
think
man.
this is another part of the education that we need to do, or awareness that we need to do in our part of the world. Hey, guys, stop comparing. Listen. You need to listen to what that person is doing or what that band is doing. Stop comparing. There's no comparisons in music.
Exactly, and the thing is, when Soulmate first started off in 2003, and prior to that, most Indian bands, except for very few, like Great Society, we were doing our own stuff. Indiscreet were doing their own stuff. We had just a very few bands that were actually writing original songs in English and bringing out albums. The rest of the bands were all doing covers.
Covers.
Whatever was on TV, that's what they were doing. So when Soulmate came on the scene and we started doing our original stuff, playing in Delhi, we played in Delhi like for a long time, 6 years, at a place called the Haze. That's where we really took off, and we played there for 6 years, 2 gigs a month. And that's where we got a big crowd of new fans. And initially, when we started out, like my idea was to try and educate the younger musicians in India about the roots of the music that they were playing. You have to internalize that music, or you have to understand where that music was coming from
Exactly.
to make it your own.
Yeah, yeah,
Being a
exactly.
copycat, being a copycat, there's no feeling in it. You can copy anybody, but if there's no soul, there's no feeling, then it doesn't make any sense.
So Rudy bhai, and so this is great, and I think it's such a pleasure to have you on. I think there's so many stories, there's so much, I think, fun stuff that we'll be doing in the coming days. Amazing to have
You,
you on
man.
board. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. And I'm happy
Not
to
at
be
all.
part of this initiative of yours. Good luck
Yeah,
always.
thank you so much.